History, as we are often told, is written by the victors. Its pages are filled with the triumphs of enduring empires, the genealogies of kings whose lines stretched for centuries, and the maps of nations that still exist today. But what of the others? What of the kingdoms that shimmered with gold and power, only to vanish into the dust and silence of the past? What of the empires whose walls now lie buried beneath the sand, their stories carried not in books, but as whispers on the wind? Welcome, fellow historians of the forgotten, to Dark Ages Historian. Today, we journey into the heart of a continent rich with epic histories, many of which have been tragically overlooked. We are not just digging for ruins, but for memories, for the ghosts of empires that chose their own end, had it forced upon them, or simply faded away like a dream upon waking. These are the stories of 8 great African kingdoms that disappeared from history, and the complex, often heartbreaking reasons why they fell. 1. The Wagadu Empire, the price of gold and a serpent's curse. Our journey begins in the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Sahel, long before the maps we know were ever drawn. Here, in a time of myth and legend, rose the first great West African empire, Wagadu, more famously known to history as the Ghana Empire. The stories say its capital was a city born from sunlight, its walls wide, its people proud, and its gold endless. From the 8th to the 11th centuries, Wagadu controlled the trans-Saharan trade routes, its kings becoming masters of salt and, more importantly, gold. Every grain of sand seemed to shimmer with its wealth. But this prosperity came at a terrible price. Legend, the lifeblood of history, tells us of Beta, a serpent god who lived in a sacred cave. Beta was the guarantor of Wagadu's fortune, but he was a jealous and hungry god. In exchange for the flowing rivers and the seams of gold, the kingdom had to offer him a sacrifice each year, the most beautiful virgin of noble blood. She would be dressed in finery, bathed in perfume, and sent into the darkness of the cave. The people would turn away, for her screams were the price of their wealth. For generations, the pact was honored. The gold flowed, and Wagadu thrived. But one year, the chosen maiden was the beloved of a brave warrior named Mamadi Sif Dikat. He could not bear the thought of her fate. Armed with his sword and his courage, he broke the sacred law. He followed her to the shrine, and when the great serpent Beta emerged, Mamadi struck. With a single, clean blow, he severed the serpent's head. In that moment, the kingdom was doomed. The stories say the moment Beta's head fell, the sky slammed shut. The 7 years of rain promised by the serpent's 7 heads turned into 7 years of devastating drought. The wells ran dry, the rivers vanished, and the once fertile land cracked like glass. The gold itself seemed to lose its luster. Traders, finding no water and no fortune, vanished. The empire, starved and broken, began to crumble from within. While the legend provides a powerful allegory, the history it cloaks is just as dramatic. The Ghana Empire's fall was a complex process. The Almoravids, a zealous Berber dynasty from the north, waged war on the empire in the 11th century, weakening its grip on the trade routes. The discovery of new gold fields outside of Wagadu's control further diverted wealth, and the same environmental pressures spoken of in the myth, overgrazing and desertification, were very real threats. The kingdom didn't vanish in a single night, but it did fall. It broke into smaller, warring states, its glory fading into the encroaching desert. Yet, the griots, the oral historians of West Africa, still tell the tale of Mamadi and the serpent. They say Wagadu was not destroyed, but that it fractured and moved for times in its history, and that some believe the serpent's curse still lingers, a warning that all gold has a cost. 2. The Kingdom of Kongo, sold by a prayer. We travel now to the dense, river-laced forests of Central Africa, where a sophisticated and powerful kingdom rose long before the first European ships scarred the horizon. This was the Kingdom of Kongo, founded in the 14th century. Its capital, Mbanza-Kongo, was a sprawling city, the heart of a complex political and spiritual state. Then, in the late 15th century, the sails came. The Portuguese arrived, bringing with them exotic goods, firearms, and a new god. The Congo king, Nzinga Nkoua, was intrigued. He converted to Christianity and was baptized as João I in 1491. But it was his son, Afonso I, who embraced the new faith with a convert zeal. Afonso saw Portugal not as a threat, but as a brother in Christ. He made Catholicism the state religion, built churches, and corresponded eloquently with the King of Portugal, seeking to modernize his nation. He believed he was building a bridge between two worlds. He did not realize he was building a path for his own kingdom's destruction. The Portuguese interest was not in souls, but in bodies. The transatlantic slave trade had begun, and Congo, with its organized structure, became a prime target. At first, the trade was small, involving prisoners of war, but the demand grew insatiable. Portuguese merchants, allied with Congo's neighbors, and even treacherous nobles within the kingdom, began kidnapping people, taking farmers from their fields, children from their homes, and even members of the nobility. King Afonso I, a man of deep faith and learning, saw his kingdom being hollowed out from the inside. His surviving letters are a testament to his desperation. In a heartbreaking 1526 letter to the King of Portugal, he wrote, "Each day the traders are kidnapping our people, children of this country, sons of our nobles and vassals, even people of our own family. This corruption and depravity are so widespread that our land is entirely depopulated." He begged his royal brother to stop the trade, to send only priests and teachers, not merchants of men. His pleas were ignored. The wealth from the slave trade was too great. The Portuguese continued, fueling civil wars and internal strife to create more captives. Congo's strength bled away. The final, fatal blow came in 1665 at the Battle of Mbwila. The Congo army, fighting to reassert its authority, was crushed by Portuguese forces armed with superior weaponry. King Antonio I was killed, his head decapitated, placed in a box, and sent to be displayed in the port of Luanda. After that, the kingdom shattered. It descended into a century of brutal civil war, breaking into smaller, rival polities that preyed on each other for captives to feed the unending machine of the slave trade. The great kingdom of Congo, which had once met Europe on equal terms, was sold, piece by piece, for the very faith it had so eagerly embraced. 3. The Luba Empire, when memory was lost. In the lush grasslands of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, another great empire bloomed, the Luba Empire. From the 16th to the late 19th century, Luba was a dominant force, but its power was not just in its warriors or kings. The true soul of the kingdom was held in memory. The Luba did not write their history in books. They encoded it in an ingenious device called the lakesa, a small, handheld wooden board studded with beads and shells. To an outsider, it was a meaningless artifact, but to a trained member of the Buddy Society, the men of memory, each bead, each carved line was a key. By touching and tracing the board, they could recite epic histories, genealogies, migration routes, and the sacred laws of the kingdom. The lakesa was not just a record, it was a living chronicle, the embodiment of Luba identity. This intricate system of governance and memory sustained the empire for centuries. But even the strongest drum falls silent when it cracks. In the late 19th century, the cracks appeared. A series of succession disputes over the throne weakened the central authority of the king. Brothers turned against uncles, and the empire's unity began to fray. It was in this moment of vulnerability that new, ruthless forces arrived from the east. Swahili Arab traders, seeking ivory and slaves, saw Luba's fractures and ruthlessly exploited them. Armed with rifles, they played one faction against another, fueling a devastating civil war. The Luba people, once united by a shared history, were now pitted against each other, village against village, brother against brother. The slavers didn't just take people, they took the kingdom's soul. In the chaos, the sacred lakesa boards were lost. Some were burned, others buried. Many simply vanished along with the men of memory who knew how to read them. With their loss, the unifying thread of Luba history was severed. There is a line, kept alive in song from the region. They did not kill our kings. They killed the ones who remembered them. That is how you erase a kingdom, not with a single battle, but by extinguishing its memory, leaving behind a people with no story to unite them. The Luba Empire dissolved, its legacy scattered like the beads from a broken lakesa. For Great Zimbabwe, the city that emptied itself, deep in southern Africa, rising from the plateau like a geological marvel, stand the ruins of a city that should not exist according to the prejudiced logic of its first European discoverers. Great Zimbabwe. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, it is a masterpiece of architecture, a city of towering stone walls, conical towers, and intricate stonework, all constructed without a single drop of mortar. At its peak, it was home to nearly 20,000 people, the capital of a vast empire whose wealth, built on cattle and the gold trade, reached as far as China. When European hunters stumbled upon these magnificent ruins in the 19th century, they refused to believe they were of African origin. They concocted elaborate, racist theories, attributing the city to Phoenicians, Romans, or even the Queen of Sheba, anyone but the ancestors of the local Shona people. They could not fathom that a black civilization, with dust and sun on its hands, had raised such a wonder. They were profoundly wrong. Great Zimbabwe was the spectacular heart of a uniquely African empire, but its end is one of history's most profound mysteries. Around 1450 AD, the city was abandoned. There are no signs of a great war, no fields of skeletons, no evidence of a final, cataclysmic battle. The people simply left. The stone walls fell silent. The hearths grew cold. What could possibly compel 20,000 people to walk away from their capital, a city built to last for eternity? Historians have debated the cause for decades. Was it a catastrophic drought that made the land unable to support such a large population? Had the trade routes that fueled its wealth shifted, moving north towards the Zambezi River? Or was it a spiritual command? Did the ancestral spirits, so vital to the Shona worldview, instruct the king and his people to leave? The only clues left behind were the 8 enigmatic soapstone birds found at the site, carvings that have become the national symbol of modern Zimbabwe. They sit, gazing out at the horizon, their silence as deep and enduring as the stone from which they were carved. The fall of Great Zimbabwe wasn't a violent end. It was an exodus, a quiet and deliberate turning away. It is a haunting reminder that sometimes the most powerful force that can unmake a kingdom is not an invading army, but a collective decision to simply walk away. 5. The Zagwe Dynasty, a kingdom carved from a prophecy. High in the mist-draped mountains of Ethiopia, a dynasty of kings performed a miracle. Between the 10th and 13th centuries, the Zagwe dynasty ruled with a power based not on sprawling conquest, but on sacred architecture and unshakable faith. Their legacy is not a tale of empire, but of devotion carved into the very bones of the earth. Their greatest king, Lalibela, was said to have been taken to heaven in a vision, where God commanded him to build a new Jerusalem in the heart of his kingdom. When he awoke, he began a project of breathtaking ambition. He did not build his churches with brick or stone. He carved them directly out of the mountainside, chiseling downwards to create 11 monolithic churches, each a single, seamless piece of rock, connected by a labyrinth of hidden tunnels. Legend says that angels continued the work by night, completing in decades what should have taken centuries. These rock-hewn churches of Lalibela stand today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a testament to an extraordinary vision. But even a kingdom built on such divine foundations could not outlast a prophecy. A rival bloodline, the Solomonids, began to emerge. They claimed direct descent from the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, a lineage that held immense, almost mythical, authority in Ethiopian tradition. A prophecy began to circulate. The throne must return to the true Solomonic line. The Zagwe, despite their piety and power, were seen as usurpers. The end of the Zagwe dynasty was not one of fire or blood. It was a political and religious capitulation. Faced with the irresistible power of the Solomonic claim and the prophecy that foretold their demise, the last Zagwe king abdicated. In 1270, the throne was transferred peacefully. The dynasty that had carved heaven out of the earth simply relinquished its power, bowing its head to what was seen as divine will. They vanished into the fog of the mountains they once ruled, leaving behind their stone churches as their only and eternal epitaph. 6. Mapungubwe, the Hill of the Golden Rhino. Before Great Zimbabwe rose to prominence, another sophisticated kingdom flourished further south, where the Limpopo and Shashi rivers meet. This was Mapungubwe, a kingdom that thrived between 1075 and 1220 AD. It was southern Africa's first state, with a revolutionary social structure. For the first time, a king and the royal elite lived separately, secluded on a sacred hill, looking down upon the commoners below. This was a society built on hierarchy, trade, and a powerful mystique. For decades, Mapungubwe was just a local legend, a sacred hill that was taboo to ascend. But in 1932, a local prospector was led to the top, where he uncovered a royal cemetery. The graves were unlike anything found before. Skeletons were buried in a seated position, facing west, adorned with gold beads, ivory bangles, and other precious artifacts. And among them was one object of breathtaking delicacy and significance, a small, exquisitely crafted rhinoceros made from gold foil tacked onto a wooden core. This golden rhinoceros is now one of Africa's most important historical artifacts. It speaks of a kingdom with masterful artisans, immense wealth from the gold and ivory trade, and a deep spiritual connection to the natural world. But like Great Zimbabwe, Mapungubwe's end is shrouded in mystery. Around 1300 AD, the kingdom was abandoned. The royal hill fell silent. The reasons were likely complex. A dramatic shift in climate, known as the Little Ice Age, made the area colder and drier, rendering agriculture unsustainable. The trade routes may have shifted north, leading to the rise of Great Zimbabwe and the decline of Mapungubwe's economic power. There was no final battle, just a leaving, an emptying. Perhaps the ancestors warned the king that the land could no longer provide, and that it was time to move on. Today, we are left with the silent hill, the ancient graves, and one tiny, perfect rhino, a burnished ghost of a forgotten golden age. 7. Takerer, drowned in its own faith. In the Senegal River Valley, another early and fierce kingdom emerged, predating even the Ghana Empire's peak. This was Takerer, a kingdom that from the 5th century AD was a major player in the trans-Saharan trade. But its most defining feature was its faith. In the 1030s, under their king Wagadu, the leadership of Takerer converted to Islam with a burning zeal. This was centuries before many of their neighbors. Wagadu outlawed traditional African religions, forcing his subjects to convert and imposing Sharia law. Shrines were destroyed, priests were exiled, and Takerer became a militant Islamic state. This newfound religious fervor gave it a powerful edge. Allied with the Almoravids, Takerer participated in the wars that would eventually cripple its great rival, the Ghana Empire. But the fire that Takerer had embraced would eventually consume it. The kingdom's militant faith created deep divisions. Internal rifts opened between different Islamic sects and between the Orthodox rulers and a populace that still clung to its old beliefs. Faith, once a unifying sword against outsiders, became a battlefield within their own borders. Over time, weakened by these internal conflicts, Takerer was swallowed by the very powers it had helped to create. It was absorbed first by the Jollof Empire and later by the mighty Mali Empire. Its name, once spoken with fear and respect along the trade routes, slowly faded from memory. It drowned, not in the waters of the Senegal River, but in the fervor of its own faith. Yet, a trace remains. Old fishermen on the river are still said to pray between two gods, the one in heaven and the one in the current below. 8. The Oyo Empire, a crown too heavy to bear. Our final story takes us to the lands of the Yoruba people in modern-day Nigeria. Here, the air once thundered with the sound of hooves and drums. This was the sound of the Oyo Empire. At its height from the 17th to the 18th century, Oyo was the thunder itself. Its power was its legendary cavalry, a terrifying force on the West African plains, and its complex political system, headed by the Elephant, a king who lived in a vast palace where drums spoke the news faster than any human messenger. Oyo grew into a massive empire, controlling key trade routes to the coast and forcing neighboring kingdoms, like Dahomey, to pay crippling tribute. It became rich and powerful, a dominant force that even European merchants had to treat with respect. But a palace can grow too tall, and a crown can become too heavy. Pride and internal rot began to eat away at the empire's foundations. The intricate system of checks and balances that had maintained stability began to fail. The most powerful challenge came from the Arona Kakanfo, the supreme commander of the army, who began to rival the authority of the Elephant himself. This power struggle cracked the crown. Civil war erupted, pitting factions of the ruling class against one another. The empire, consumed by its internal conflicts, became vulnerable. Slave raids from its neighbors intensified, and the rising Fulani Caliphate to the north began to exert immense military pressure. In 1835, the mighty capital, Oyo was abandoned. The empire collapsed, its thunder silenced. The great drum of Oyo was never struck again. But did it truly disappear? If you have ever heard the rhythm of Yoruba drums in Brazil, or seen the vibrant Orisha altars in Havana, Cuba, then you have heard the ghost of Oyo. The empire is gone, but its people, scattered across the ocean by the brutal slave trade, its own decline exacerbated, carried its culture, its religion, and its spirit with them. The kingdom may have fallen, but its rhythm proved to be immortal. Wagadu, Kongo, Luba, Great Zimbabwe, Zagwe, Mapungubwe, Takra, Oyo. 8 kingdoms, 8 stories of glory and collapse. They fell to curses and to prayers, to internal rot and foreign greed, to the whispers of prophecy and the silence of a people walking away. What if we are wrong to look for their endings in broken walls and forgotten maps? In many African cosmologies, an end is never truly an end. It is a journey, a transformation. What if these empires chose to disappear? What if they were not lost to the sand, but became the sand? History is not a static list of dates and names. It is a living, breathing entity, and sometimes it holds its breath. The stories of these lost kingdoms are a vital reminder that our understanding of the past is incomplete, and that there are entire worlds waiting to be rediscovered, not in grand monuments, but in a whispered name, a remembered psalm, or the enduring rhythm of a distant drum. They remind us that even in the darkest of ages, the echoes of greatness can never be truly silenced.